Hey everyone, Unblocked is a bi-monthly event series where guests are asked questions in an AMA-style format, focusing on questions relevant to early-stage startups and blockchain technology. Unblocked is sponsored by DLab, a startup accelerator and venture studio that sits within the SOSV family. You can find out more at www.dlab.vc. We hope you enjoy the conversation. So, why don't you just introduce yourselves to everybody here so they can understand who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure, you bet. So, my name is Michael. I've been sort of a fan and part of the sort of SOSV family for a little while now. I originally joined as a up and coming startup founder with baby's first startup, local social mobile over in Shanghai, and joined China Accelerator during batch 5. Now, the team and the product really was not cut out for it, so we didn't end up going all the way with that one, but we remained in great terms. Ever since then, I ended up joining the startup grind family and really developing a relationship there. Really learned a lot of my marketing chops there, and learned a lot about media as the editor in chief, and built a pretty successful media organization there. And having done that, kind of sort of reaching a plateau that I could learn there, I sort of struck out on my own. And after some winding twists and turns, ended up starting up a company called Truth Cartel, which primarily focuses on doing marketing for emerging tech companies, biotech, AI, machine learning, and of course cryptocurrencies, which is really sort of my domain of expertise, marketing wise. But beyond that, I'm a Polish immigrant, so started from the bottom, so to speak. And for fun, everything from DJing electronic music to doing some travels, to reading and writing, the usual assortment of things.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, how old is Truth Cartel now?
It's coming up on year 3 right now. Actually, I think by actually December it's going to be in its 3rd year.
Wow. How many people work there?
So it's a funny thing. Formally, about right now, I think we have about 24 people working on different projects. But it's structured a little bit like a DAO, in so much as people come and go as they please. Everyone's a successful independent freelancer. So the entire thing is run by a pool of contractors, with me sort of bringing in work, doing account management, that kind of stuff. But anyone can sell, anyone can bring a friend in, and when we have work for them, they get assigned. So the number ranges anywhere from 0 to 24, depending on how you spin it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And was that is that how it was conceived at the beginning, to run it sort of like in a DAO type model, or is that kind of just evolved over time?
I don't want to give too much credit to my planning.
Yeah.
It originally started over drinks with a friend who was starting up a suddenly extremely well-funded cryptocurrency project. So at the time, there was a Stream Token. It was attempting to be kind of a YouTube competitor. It decided that it wasn't going to continue based on compliance reasons, but at the time, it was a hot job for a marketer without a gig. So joined them, and then suddenly I became the marketing guy for crypto in San Francisco, and that being a flashpoint for sort of ICOs in the day. It was one project and a third and a fourth, and trying to plan for not eventually getting sued for trying to market securities, nor trying to have no real way of writing off expenditures or having ways to pay contractors. We just incorporated off the bat there, and it sort of grew very organically. So I was running it before I ever knew it needed to exist, and certainly before I knew what the model was going to be. But it's proved really, really good for us, really flexible.
It's great. And so your focus mainly is on crypto related companies and marketing for crypto related companies. And is that, I mean, it seems like something you just kind of fell into. You always wanted to do marketing, or was marketing also something you fell into?
Yeah, sure enough. So we started with crypto, then we went into sort of emerging tech, then ended up doing enterprise, and now we kind of do individuals and companies.
Mm.
And the thing that we do really, really well now is build authority as a service, which is really kind of what crypto needs to be doing right now, relative to what it was needing to do, 2 years ago, which is to build a great funnel for converting investors. But marketing is an interesting one. I'm in high school. I'm thinking, I love psychology. I love philosophy. Sure can't see myself doing either of those jobs very successfully. And so marketing seemed almost like a way of applying psychology, right? And so then I stumbled my way through, the advertising world, worked at like an ad agency, for a while. I worked in diplomacy for a while, and it was one of those things where like, okay, diplomacy is doing the right things too slowly. Advertising is doing the wrong things altogether too quickly. So I found some happy medium in startups and tech. And so it's that intersection of, I love technology. I love what it can do. I love ultimately that it will eventually do everything. What we've done is just use marketing to pick the ideas that we think would really genuinely make the world somehow a better place. And then we use the superpower of giving it visibility to help it get along.
That's great. And so, I guess what kind of crypto companies, can you say which kind of crypto companies you work with today?
Mhm. Yeah, sure enough. So probably my current claim to fame is working a lot with the Algorand team. Been with them for probably over a year, doing everything from community growth to content to PR. And some other folks that some of your listeners might know are Republic. We've done a lot around the content for their token launch, which is called the Note, which just launched. Ironically on Algorand, which I couldn't have designed myself. And beyond that, I'm doing a lot of deep work with Trust Token. I work there during the day and then work on my agency during the night. And there I'm the head of growth. So do everything from comms to, marketing campaigns. And right now doing a lot in terms of, revamping our social media entirely, bringing new people to the team. So really, really deep hands-on work there. Those are probably some of the big ones with claim to fame, but I've done stuff with, Oracle, BCG, Comcast as well for some of those enterprise names.
And so what have you found? I mean, I guess comparing, Republic to Trust Token to Algorand, has each presented their own unique marketing opportunity, or, are they all kind of grouped into that crypto, the problems surrounding marketing for crypto companies?
Yeah, sure. It's each it's like a father thinking about his children. Love them all equally, right?
Yeah.
Algorand is super interesting because ultimately they're a protocol, and so you're really marketing like a computer language almost, right? And the thing to do there is actually it's a fairly sophisticated thing to try to communicate what it is and to whom. So the best thing that we could possibly do there is help them tell their story to the right people as simply as possible, which is why we relied so much on content and audience development. And we can kind of go, there's a really interesting model around what type of crypto companies are out there in terms of what makes them successful. We can kind of gem on that. You look at Republic, they're actually a thriving company, a thriving non-crypto company, right? They're, the primary sort of equity crowdfunding company out there, I think. There's a few others, but they're really stealing out of the spotlight. When we launched the Note, they were basically trying to platform their internal crypto knowledge to something where like, hey, you guys, this is your like special thing, run with it. And so they brought me in to kind of smooth out the internal comms and to kind of really figure out how this product should be built and conveyed. And so being part of that really early Tiger team, it really was it was like one of those like Uber launcher squads. It was like a handful of people, ragtag but brilliant, and just trying to like figure out how this thing was going to work with the mandate that it had to. So that was also in some ways a crypto phenomenon right there. You look at Trust Token, they have an existing very, very strong product. The true currencies are used, far and wide. Just over the weekend, they hit like almost close to $250,000 in market cap. So, they're in the top 50 already. They're doing their thing. The question is, what comes after, right? What comes after for a stablecoin company, like most stablecoin companies, that makes its money by putting the cash that's currently in reserve to back up the dollars in American banks that offer interest rates that are largely, dictated by American governments. Mm-hmm. So they got to start thinking fast, and thankfully they have.
Yeah, particularly since those interest rates are like zero. So
precisely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens next for all stable coins, right? What happens when we hit negative interest rates for stable coins, right?
Yeah.
So they've been very, very innovative about that, and they're wrapping Trust Token true currencies into DeFi to actually still offer yields both for users and for the company itself. But each one of those is its own little challenge.
Yeah, of course. And you've worked, for those that aren't aware, Michael's also a mentor for D-Lab. So you worked with a lot of the D-Lab. You worked with a lot of the D-Lab companies. So I guess what I would ask is, what has your experience been generally when you're working with crypto related, from marketing for crypto companies? Like,
Right.
what makes it a unique challenge?
Yeah, you bet. So definitely being the sort of entrepreneur residence for a season there was a real dream, honestly. And for anyone who's hyper talented in marketing or tech or social, what have you, I definitely recommend trying to find that opportunity if you can make it happen, because you get incredible exposure to some incredible companies. You guys have picked a really good bunch of the litter. And when you look at the companies that come through, they're still in the early stages of figuring out which one of these three things they're really going to be driving forward as the tip of the spear of the market, right? So a model that I really like for crypto companies specifically is: Are you going to if you're going to pick one of these things, are you going to be optimizing around adoption, so really kind of sales and the BD side of things, around marketing, so really making a noisy splash, maybe raising a fair amount of money and otherwise getting a big group of people behind you and a big community behind you? Or are you going to be optimized around technology, right? Which maybe means going into the cave and coding for a few years before you ever release it to the world. And then when you do, you're really hopefully, you've made your inroads with the developer communities on your respective forums and chat groups. So if you want to do a quick pass on what each of those might look like as a heuristic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, if you're a founder,
Sure.
what advice would you give them when they're trying to pick between one of those three?
Right. Well, it depends entirely on your product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a company that is trying to basically do something interesting in the NGO and fundraising space, right? And for them, I think that they should be going after adoption, because they'll get more people. Like, even if the technology is satisfactory and it accomplishes something that otherwise isn't doable without a blockchain, and if the marketing is reasonable enough that it won't put up red flags, okay, social seems to be managed. There's no, maybe a press story here and there to legitimize them further. Then all they got to be doing is talking to people who might be potential, philanthropists, NGOs, and nonprofits to get this thing in as many hands as possible, because that is what's ultimately going to be persuasive. So I think about what would you need to win if you can only win one of these three things? Does your technology have to be the best? Does your marketing need to kill it so that everyone thinks of you as the solution? Or is that going to come from sales, right? So I think of marketing as a more of a consumer side thing. So if you're building a sort of a consumer side blockchain, consumer DApp, then you want to go for marketing. If you are doing a more of a B2B play, you're really going to have to go after adoption. If you're building a protocol, you're really probably going after the tech. But all sort of exceptions abound.
So, I mean, delving a little bit more, into your area of expertise, marketing. What are some of the best practices, as it pertains to crypto-related companies, as it pertains to marketing? Also, have you seen? I guess my question. Let's start out with early stage startups, because I come across this all the time.
Right.
The founders are brilliant, tech savvy, very technical in nature. They hate marketing. Is that a crypto? I guess my question is that a crypto issue, or is that an issue generally with early stage founders, because by nature they're more business oriented and trying to bootstrap the business, and marketing is right, in their mind a secondary thing?
Sure. I would argue that it's largely like it's the double-edged sword of a brilliant technologist.
Yeah.
And so there's this common Paul Grahamism. You gotta have someone to build it and someone to sell it. And a lot of the crypto startups specifically see the promise of blockchain, and I was enamored by it as anyone, and they don't really necessarily think to start doing the selling. And so it becomes something that probably also in your experience, you gotta sort of smooth it along. You gotta
totally,
kick it up a little bit.
Totally, they're building something, and I definitely think what they're building is super cool. But if you don't tell anybody about it,
right,
no one's just going to miraculously find your product and use it. Also, it's useful because you might be building the wrong thing. So
right,
your users are going to tell you what they want, and you're just one person in a world of billions. So, so I guess, like, what are some of the best practices you would give to early stage founders when, for example, they hate, most of them, in my experience, don't really like marketing, and it doesn't really come intuitively to them. So what are some of the best practices you would say?
Sure. Maybe the quickest sort of the quickest one is the jujitsu, the idea that it's sales or marketing. From that, some
Mm,
domain that's infinitely deep, to simply right now I just need to talk to people, and I need to talk
mm,
to the people who might buy this thing. That's a good place to start because it makes it a little bit more navigable, and ultimately that's really what they got to do. Right
mhm,
now, sometimes you got to get to the point where you're talking to thousands of them at a time with ads or press, but it's really the same thing. And so if you know that that's going to be the case, then where any early stage founder should start is by, ideally having a little Rolodex of people who would be their ideal clients or who would be their at least ideal advisors on the product, right? So sort of customer advocacy, right?
mm,
And that's as easy as thinking of the companies you would dream to work with and finding some ally there that could hopefully give you some feedback, right? It's as simple as search the company, head on LinkedIn, use an email scraper of some sort, depending on your GDPR restrictions, and otherwise do a little LinkedIn message to them, and you send enough of those out, and I can guarantee that eventually someone is going to be willing to have a conversation just to give you a little bit
mm.
of feedback on this thing.
And when you're reaching out, should you be using one copy? Should you be using multiple copies? Should you be constantly editing them? Which is, or
Yeah,
is it just as simple? Like if you're reaching out to these individuals on, do you find LinkedIn is the best way to reach these people, or is it Twitter, or is it sending them a cold email?
sure,
Um,
sure. Really, any of those are going to work. Crypto. It's usually said that crypto happens on Twitter, but deals also happen on email. And
mhm,
LinkedIn is a good place to find these people.
mhm,
So I would look for people on LinkedIn. That's probably a good pool by which to source your candidates for conversations. Where you go about contacting them is probably whatever you're most comfortable with. So if you're a big Twitter hotshot, then stick to your lane. But if you've got nothing going for you, then email is probably your best bet.
mm,
With that said, I do think that you want to be editing that copy often. But probably the biggest rule is that don't drown them with information. You know, classic story of, hey, here's how I found you. Here's why I think you're interesting and why I would like to talk. Here's what I'm working on. And I would like 15 minutes of your feedback for this specific feature or for this specific thing because, some relevant content about why they might be the expert. So you make them
yeah,
feel nice, right? What kind of email would you like to get? You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Well, it's the old adage we like to say: you ask for advice and you get money. If you ask for money, you'll get
Sure,
advice. So it's like,
certainly.
I totally, as someone who's looking for new startups, I totally really enjoy when people are like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. Please check it out. Would love to get your thoughts." Personally, I'm more susceptible to responding to that type of thing than being like, "Hey, here's our pitch. We're raising a seed round of 500K. What are your thoughts?"
Yeah.
So
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Email
yeah,
Paul.
yeah. Um, so what are some other general best practices? I mean, that's for, I guess, talking to customers. But what about like brand awareness or things like that? Getting on podcasts or what other best practices would you say?
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about brand awareness, right? So that's an interesting model where we can really cut that up into a few pieces. I think there are always going to be more pieces than I'm going to spit out here, but these
Mm,
are the ones that I can really say you can reverse engineer this, right? So there are four pieces of brand awareness. I like to call it authority because it can also apply to individuals. That I think you can genuinely reverse engineer, and each one of these has its own little ladder, right? You do one thing well, and you go to the next layer of that ladder. Very quickly, it's thought leadership, media, which we'll call sort of accreditation because it makes you look more credible, affiliation, so being with the right people, and there's lots of ways to do that. And then finally, we're going to talk about audience development, right? And in brief, thought leadership on the simplest possible, at the very bottom rung of the totem pole, you're writing a blog post, probably on your own blog or to your own newsletter, that somehow tries to explain what you're doing and why it's important. At the very, very highest echelons of this, you're probably having a column on Inc. or somewhere else where you're writing about the trends of the industry. Maybe you're a one-time guest poster at TechCrunch, where you somehow are navigating the sharing of your own ideas, originating your own ideas in authoritative places, right? Now, this can be in audio. You go on a podcast. This can be in video. You can have a YouTube channel. You can have a TikTok stream full of interesting information. Whatever you want to do, but cultivate that somewhere, right? So originating your own ideas through thought leadership is the big thing, and you just keep climbing the ladder. You post your own blog first, then you try to guest post to Hacker Noon, then you keep going up that ladder and maybe keep pivoting that into bigger places to write. And that's good for anybody. That everyone should be doing that, especially crypto CEOs. And if you can't do it yourself, get a ghostwriter. You can probably get them for around 15 cents a word, honestly. Maybe 25 cents a word if they're savvy crypto techies. But this shouldn't break the bank.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess write often. I mean, you see that frequently. A lot of VCs do it. Okay. Yeah. And I guess you're explaining your product at the same with time.
Press, right? Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, and you also, frankly, getting more clarity on your product, right? Because when you write it, the page has a real way of getting you to get past your own BS. You really can't spin yarns. You really got to put down the essentialism there.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess it helps with founders trying to explain their product to people who aren't, this, of course, we're all aware of the steep learning curve required to use crypto, but it helps, I guess, founders trying to explain it outside of that to individuals outside of that community.
Sure. And it's interesting because when you think about there are 3 other little bits here, but any one of these could also be good alternatives to, rather than you being your own writer, you appearing with others who are experts already and doing your best to explain to their audience. So that's when I think about affiliation. That's when I think about podcasts, or otherwise appearing alongside people who are already authorities to not just boost your profile and make you their peer, at least in the eyes of some, but also to be placed in such a cohort of people that, well, if these guys are here, my audience will probably understand me, even if I go a little bit long, even if I go a little complicated. So I love podcasts for that. I love speaking opportunities for that. I love, mentorship opportunities for that. It all boosts your ability to be rubbing shoulders with the right people. And, those people could also become eventually advisors or mentors or even investors. So building that affiliation where you really begin to rub shoulders with the right people is key. And if we're going to do this model again, well, the very, very simplest thing you can do is just to, maybe attend a conference here and there, or attend sessions like this and maybe ask good questions, follow up with the speaker after, that kind of thing. But the very, very high echelons, you're really, on podcasts, you're really on panels. Maybe you're doing keynotes at universities or at conferences, and that really boosts your profile because then you're in the speaker room, or at least back in the days when there were such things as speaker rooms. It's, my God, it's like you've been knighted. It's like you're a sir or a ma'am or madam right now. You go around and like everyone's your friend. What do you do? Oh, you're here. Like if you're here, you must be good people's, right? You're minted. And the deals that are happening behind speaker stages are unheard of. That's really where magic happens at any conference. So that's now affiliation and thought leadership. And when it comes to the media, we can talk about that, and we can also talk a little bit about audience development. But that's different per channel.
Yeah, I guess let's go right into media. Like, what type of media forms? Where do crypto companies sort of fall short here in terms of media and generating their audience?
Yeah, both tremendous questions. Media is a tough one because ultimately the media narrative changes so often that you're really having to keep up with what do people care about right now. At the beginning, people really cared about technology, right? You could get a story on a major outlet just for having built a blockchain, just for launching a layer one. That era passed us right on by. Now try to get a feature in. So we're kind of back to this, like, technology ain't gonna cut it. Marketing is no longer cutting it either, right? Just having a well-marketed project is not getting a lot of journalists out of bed. And so what's really killing it in the press is adoption. And so if you're going to think which one of these 3 you want to go for, and again, not all 3 will be good for all projects, that adoption is actually a very, very critical one for getting media coverage. So when it comes to actually, securing that coverage, the best bet you will ever have is to not pitch a story, but to make friends in the press. And just like you're pitching somebody to get feedback on your product, the best thing you can do is try to make a friendship with someone in the press before you need it. And that's as simple as saying, hey, you know what? I've been in this industry for the last 6 years. I know a thing or two. I see you write about blockchain. Here's what my expertise is. I've got no story for you, but I want to be a resource. And I wonder if you'd be down for a little coffee. And journalists are always looking for sources. And if you can be an authoritative source, especially if you have a decent audience, and especially if you've done some publishing of your own, these are all, in fact, synergistic, elements, then you'll be a favorite, But the upper echelons of this, you might be hiring a PR agency, which is we could have a whole episode on that. But ultimately, you can work your way up to, again, getting that Hacker Noon post, into then getting maybe a post on a crypto media that's not top tier, into maybe getting a Cointelegraph, CoinDesk, which is really going to be kind of minted at that point, into getting mainstream press, whether it's an Inc. or Fortune Entrepreneur. You get 2 or 3 of those logos on your website, and suddenly like your what we call minimum viable press here is done. You get those 3 logos, you're kind of minted. And it's largely a matter of, first of all, not setting off red flags. And if once you hit a certain amount of press, you're actually setting off like really good fireworks. People are like, oh, well, these guys trust them.
Yeah.
Must be minted.
Well, I guess, what I'm hearing from you is that you have to make things appear, and by being associated with individuals or being associated with other brands, right? TechCrunch, Forbes,
right.
Even Cointelegraph, that to other people that makes you appear legit. And right. I think where a lot of early stage startups founders fail at this is that they feel not at ease with sort of associating or kind of faking it in some way. I wouldn't say I don't know if faking it's a good word, but I think that's where they feel unease. It's like, oh, I have to talk to this journalist and cozy up to this person, or I have to cozy up to this person, which I totally understand, but I think to some degree it's necessary when you're, a 2-person team. Do you feel like it's that's kind of where the friction is, where founders are hesitant to sort of jump in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's one thing to sort of be learning to build a company. It's one other thing to be navigating the social political dynamics of journalism.
Yeah.
So I empathize, and I mean, I can only really empathize. I mean, I had to learn English the hard way when I was an immigrant. I mean, I was an antisocial, pretty chubby kid throughout.
Congrats you speak English without a Polish accent, so congrats.
Well, some of your viewers might disagree. It's really funny who says, "Oh, like I hear the accent."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you but half.
Yeah. So,
I agree. It's tough.
So what, I guess what success metrics should early stage startups look, track or keep when it comes to marketing, brand awareness, things like that? Like, what are some concrete things?
For sure. So, to just do a double back on your journalist conversation. This is now we're getting to psychology a little bit. When the brain is trying to do new things, like talk to a journalist or launch a startup, your brain is really like your heart basically needs you to apply courage. Your brain needs you to apply evidence. Mm-hmm. So your courage is going to get you the first 2 conversations. And then you have those, you realize that they haven't burned you at the stake. You start developing evidence that, hey, maybe this is okay. So, your first 2 or 3, there's no real secret to it. You just got to grit your teeth through it. Ultimately realize these are people too. They're probably as nervous to meet you as you are to meet them sometimes.
Well, also in some cases it might be, it might take 10 or 50 to get that data. And that's where people that's where people get, in my previous job, cold calling or cold outreach is a big aspect of it. And it's kind of demoralizing in a way, because you're sending out hundreds of emails or calling dozens of people, might get one response,
but in that position, you're also developing such like resistance to rejection. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You must have been steel at this point.
Listen, I get rejected all the time. So, but yeah, no, it's kind of like a muscle. No, but you're right. It's like a muscle, you need to have the courage, and it's just a muscle, that you just need to keep working.
Yeah.
And I totally understand, when, for example, when I first started doing it, I definitely didn't like it, and I felt very apprehensive at doing it, but it's like, again, trying new things and doing something. It's all about stepping out of your comfort zone in a way.
Totally.
So
there's no perfect way to do it. So that's the classic thing that I think people get stuck on. It's like, there's a right way to do this. I need to learn the right way, and then I'll succeed. Yeah. Well, you'll find your right way by doing it a bunch of times wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess, persistence is just key, super key. And
certainly for founders especially.
Yeah. And so going back to, what success metrics would you give, 2-person, 3-person teams, as it pertains to marketing?
Yeah, sure. So, the sort of, I think the right answer here is to reverse engineer from dollars. So if you don't have a product you can sell for dollars, then what's the next best thing down the funnel of getting to dollars, right? So you think about there's a wonderful model for this called Pirate Metrics, for it's AAARR, right? Each one stands for an element of the funnel, right? I do recommend that presentation for anyone kind of trying to get their head around mechanics of metrics and
Where can they find it? Just search it, or
yeah, just do a little Google search on it. It's a slide share. It's a video. There's a billion blog posts about it. Originally designed by the 500 Startups team as a way of teaching their startups how to think about marketing mechanics.
And the name of it is R?
It's Pirate Metrics.
Pirate Metrics. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Super good quality. So that's a good place to start for anybody. And with that model, if you know that your ultimate goal is to make money, okay, how do you make money? Okay, well, we sell a product. Well, we haven't built the product yet. Okay, what can you do now to get to the place where as soon as the product is ready, those folks are ready to sign and pay? Okay, well, the next thing up might be LOIs, letters of intent, right? Or it might be a consulting contract to build out a proof of concept, right? Okay, well, let's say you're not there yet. What's the step above that? Right. Well, it's at the very least having very, very serious conversations that are continuing to be warmed regularly of leads who would want it as soon as you build it, who are also giving you feedback about how they want it. Right. And you just keep going up this stack, right? Where I'd love to know of any startup founder who says, like, these are my metrics and these are what I'm tracking, then, like, cool, take me through how this very verifiably takes you through the progression of actually making you guys revenue. Right. So it's a simple and somewhat brutalist kind of framing on this, where, like, how is that going to make you $1? How is writing a blog post that gets a bunch of comments going to get you $1 unless you reach out to the folks who comment and engage in conversation with them, right? So brand awareness, broadly speaking, is not really sales, right? It's if you're very good at brand awareness and marketing on a sort of broad spectrum, then what it does is it lowers your cost of customer acquisition. And each of those comments is an opportunity for customer acquisition. You got to reach out to them and you got to try to close them with whatever you got, even if it's just a conversation to see if they're your target customer. So whatever metrics they choose, just try to find a way to get those metrics as close to the money as possible, in my humble opinion. And if you can't get there, then keep going up in terms of abstraction from there in a way that is reducible to dollars generated.
Okay. What are some, like, what would you say, what are some common misconceptions startup founders, 2-3 person teams, what do they generally make about marketing? Like, do you need a budget? A complaint I get sometimes is like, oh, we're only 2 people. Are those all valid, or?
Right. I think the single biggest mistake that they make is vanity metrics begin to overtake true, real progress.
What do you mean by vanity metrics?
Sure. Vanity metrics are metrics that don't ultimately lead to dollars. So the examples are abundant, right? The size of their Twitter following, right? The fact that a certain individual followed their Twitter, right? The fact that they published a blog post, maybe an unread blog post, for what it's worth. These mechanics that are marketing mechanics nonetheless, but ultimately don't have a clear project, like they don't have a clear line to dollars. They don't have a clear line to what would be formally called startup progress, are probably the biggest ones. So if a startup is trying to fundraise, how many meetings with the VCs are they having? And how are those meetings going? And are those meetings improving over time, right? If they're trying to close customers, how many conversations are they having with customers on a given week? How are those conversations going? How are the follow-ups, right? And what are the next steps like, right? How many people are signing LOIs or, proof of concept builds or, actually trying to sign for, being customer. And when it comes to marketing, marketing is almost considered to be this thing where, it's a black box. And if there's anything to be left here with, it's that there's no magic to it. It's talking to people. It's just talking to people at scale if necessary. But for most people, it is sure as heck not necessary. It's just necessary to have those one-on-one conversations. So the vanity metrics are anything that gives you the sensation of progress, despite the fact that you are running into place. And a lot of marketing is like that. I mean, the most common example is someone says, okay, we're going to do marketing now. They spin up a bunch of social media pages, and then they start posting those social media pages regularly as one of their, marketing mechanics, their marketing thing. They're yelling to the void. They have no followers. There's no one really interested in them. They'd be much better off cultivating one-on-one relationships and eventually telling those relationships, hey, I built that Twitter. We're going to be doing more comms here. So everything is ultimately reducible to, are you making very real progress against your singular North Star?
Hmm.
And for most
Would you,
folks,
so I guess also organization is also key.
Right.
Are founders okay to do it in Google Sheets, for example, or would you recommend, a CRM system, something like that? In your experience, does that type of thing matter?
There's a funny thing about light fests, having just been on the boat this weekend, which is the best one is the one you wear. So the best CRM is the one you use. And Google Sheets is just fun. As the sort of classic marketing adage is use the simplest possible thing until it breaks. And I would recommend that.
Are there any types of, what kind of shortcuts can founders do when it relates to, I guess that's, a very generalist question, but what are some quick little things founders can do to help with like brand awareness, for example?
Yeah,
that aren't like that labor intensive, that are just like throwaways.
Sure. One of the things it's kind of understanding what it is, what resources are they bringing to bear as they start the company. It's there's no founder who starts their company as a blank slate, free of personality, free of past experience. Most people come into it with some sort of background, where they've been in corporate for a while, or they've been a researcher for some time, and it's really important to kind of tune into what are you coming into this thing with, and how can you tap your pre-existing network to get a little bit extra visibility, right? Presumably, the thing you're building ties into that somehow, because that's the domain expertise that you bring to your company, right? So if you're an enterprise person, then it's an opportunity to go to your BCG colleagues or ex-BCG colleagues there and say, I'm building this thing. Anyone who'd be interested in this, considering the fact they see probably hundreds of companies each year as consultants on the bench, and just start jamming with them, especially when you have a warm intro, someone who's already been a member there. If you're a university student, amazing. So many doors will be open to you because everyone's trying to enrich young minds, and they don't mind doing things for free, and they don't mind ultimately helping out. So especially if you're a master's thesis like a master's thesis student or a PhD student, you're still a student, and any email that says I'm a college student or blank is really going to have a lot of doors open to them versus someone who's a grizzled startup vet sometimes. So the answer also somewhat general is try to understand where you're coming from and leverage what you're starting with versus try to do everything from scratch. Lean on your enterprise experience, lean on any media experience you have, any friends who are journalists, but start with your inner network, right? And ultimately start talking to them. More likely than not, if you're not necessarily a marketing savant, they'll give you tips to market your thing if, number one, it's understandable, and number one, it seems like it's going to solve problems. And so what you're really looking for, and you'll notice this with investors too, I'm sure, which is like the moment that they start pitching your thing for you, like they buy into the idea and then they start talking about how cool it is, or it could do this, it could do that, I could introduce you to this guy. That's when you're on the right track. And so your main job as a founder up to that point is to get it explainable and interesting. And when you can do that, you go back to your colleagues from whatever the heck you're coming from, and you talk about it a little bit. Then the folks who are marketing minded, who are business savvy minded, they're going to start making doors open. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, but that would be
no, of course. And you alluded to earlier, we talked about some of the platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter. Are there some platforms that you find are most effective than others, or is it really just everything kind of works? Are there some platforms that you're like, this, it really isn't effective?
Sure. Well, I would generally say right now, Facebook is not effective in so much as it's only effective when you pay them. When you pay them, it's tremendously effective, but it's sure as heck not effective in the early days. Similarly, I think Instagram is usually ineffective for the kinds of companies that we're trying to build here. Although for other companies, it's going to be the best possible acquisition channel. Great for e-commerce, great for beauty, health and wellness, great for fashion, not so great for tech you have to explain. So those are two off the bat right there where you can probably start not spending so much time there. I think LinkedIn is actually quite cool for producing content, but that content should be there's ways to do content on LinkedIn well. And if there was, a best practice, it would be producing that content in a long form format about somehow weaving your company into a personal experience, and ideally using engagement pods, which is basically groups of people who will comment and like each other's posts, which will shoot you up to the organic rankings of LinkedIn so you appear on many, many feeds. But again, it's useless unless you talk to these people after they comment on your stuff. There's a few other examples here, but probably the best of all is going to be Twitter. For crypto, Twitter's where the conversation happens. Now, Twitter is not about posting stuff. This is the irony of it. It's certainly not about posting a bunch of links. It's about posting opinions and then engaging in conversations. And so if any of the people on the team want to begin doing LinkedIn well, then they're going to be looking, they still have the Rolodex of people that they should be talking to, right? They're still starting with like, these are my target market people. Mm-hmm. They now engage in conversations with them. When that person tweets, they like it, they comment, they see something interesting. Eventually they go a step further and send them a direct message, or they retweet things, right? And then eventually you begin cultivating a relationship. But if you're going to be using LinkedIn for business, you got to be actually having conversations, not posting into the void. We talk about Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. If you can crack that, more power to you. But I've not seen any successful business use cases yet.
I think I agree. I mean, as someone who's I hang out on Twitter and things like that, I think it really lives in the not just posting things, but posting comments on other people's thoughts and then engaging in a conversation either with that person or with someone else. I've found that generates, because then people start liking it, you get more impressions, and then you come across, to your point, you come across as like a thought leader, in a way. Would you say that marketing is really that different for an early stage company versus a more later stage company, ultimately?
The trouble of it is, and it's largely the later you are, the things that evolve over time are the amount of funnels and the complexity of them, right? That's the simplest possible way to frame it. So, if you're an early stage founder, you're probably looking at one channel for acquisition, cold email or Twitter. You sure as heck should not be doing Facebook, LinkedIn, and everything else too. Just stick to one or two channels. Keep it very simple. Keep grinding on them until you're certain they're not working, right? None of these things are early to ROI, right? And then the complexity of the channel is usually going to be extremely simple. You engage in a conversation with a person over an extended period of time, then you DM them to have a conversation. That conversation leads to some sort of interest that might help you with your product or might lead to be a customer, and then you sign an LOI or build a proof of concept, right? By the time you get to an advanced like a late stage company, like words like CRO, conversion rate optimization and stuff, like this stuff gets thrown around. There are literally roles invented for late stage companies only. A/B testing of their web pages, optimizing their funnels, optimizing ad spend or return on ad cost. It's these like, suddenly there's more jargon. There's all sorts of employees whose job is this one tiny little speck of the funnel, and you're targeting so many different funnels at once. And so that progression is organic. It happens over time. It's not like, okay, we raised an A round, now we need to be on 3 more social media channels. You only add things when you fully saturated the one you're already using, then you get another, right?
Yep.
But the progression is organic. You'll wake up to a complicated and sophisticated media and marketing organization way later in your career than it won't be dropped on you.
No, that makes sense. So the last question I had, and I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but I'll end with this, is like, I alluded to it earlier. We work here at SOSV with a lot of early stage startup founders. In my experience, a lot of them suck at marketing. I'm not going to name names. They most probably know who they are. And the irony is that they know they suck at marketing. They know it in their head, so I guess the question is what would you say to those founders that hate marketing but need to do it? Like, how do they keep themselves engaged? Like, what advice would you say?
The simplest thing is to not overcomplicate it. Marketing is not some grand, late stage funnel optimizing, conversion rate improving, return on ad spend optimizing thing. It's just talking to people at different levels of scale and using different mediums. And the best possible thing for those founders to do is to start super, super small, wherever they feel confident and curious. Confident, maybe on Twitter. Curious, maybe you're talking about this journalist because you think their story is interesting. So don't make it a thing you have to do or should do. Just use it as an opportunity to talk to people who you're genuinely interested in forming relationships with. Not only is that going to lead you to better results because you're actually going to do the damn thing, like wearing the right life vest, but you're also going to hopefully, make some new friends. They're going to feel from you your enthusiasm. And that's going to lead to one connection here, one connection there, and one connection beyond. So don't make it complicated. Follow your curiosity and do the stuff that you're going to do for a while, not because you feel you should.
Sorry, one more question, but
Shoot.
How important is your website?
It's important. The website is not a red flag.
Okay.
You go to the website, I should know what you're doing, and I should be able to escalate my relationship with you. I should be able to say, okay, I like this. I'm going to read a blog post, or I'm going to give you my email, or I'm going to sign up to get a demo. So it's important for explaining it and for escalating my commitment in partnership to your company.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk, and not only did we come together, we created, or you helped create the original branding of Unblocked.
Put that on me.
Yeah,
improve it.
No, but I'm going to be borrowing another thing from you. Where how can we be helpful?
It's super kind of you. I very much appreciate that. Well, you can certainly follow me on my own little accounts there on social media. Twitter probably is the best. Gasiorek M. So that's going to be Gasiorek M on Twitter. And then chat me up. If you're doing something interesting and you want a little marketing advice, just send me a message. Let's have a conversation. Let's see how I can be helpful. It's just something that I enjoy the most. Like these scheming opportunities where I can oh, that's how you grow this thing. It makes my day. So this kind of conversation does make my day too, and I really appreciate being able to be here.
Great, awesome. So again, reach out to Michael on Twitter. That's the best way to reach you.
It's gonna be the
if you have questions relating to media and anything like that. It's been a real pleasure to talk. Looking forward to the next time.
Me too. Yeah. Thanks again, and best of luck at everything at SOSV. You guys are doing great work.